Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the channel. My name is Yordle Swaggins, and I am a Volibear OTP. I've been playing him for about a couple years now, and he's become my main ever since. I've been in Grandmasters for about 3 seasons now, and I have peaked Challenger by only playing Volibear. This will be an in-depth guide on the Volibear top lane on how to maximize his potential. First, we're going to be talking about runes, and what are the most optimal runes for Volibear to take in the top lane. For almost every lane, you will be taking 2 runes. You will either be taking Press the Attack or Grasp of the Undying. Both of these keystone runes are the most optimal runes for Volibear to take in the top lane. Lethal Tempo can be argued to be very good on Volibear top lane, but from my experience, PTA outperforms Lethal Tempo way more than it doesn't. Now, the rune you choose is dependent on the champion you play against. Now, if you're playing versus certain champions like Riven, Renekton, and Shen, these champions engage in shorter trade patterns with you in lane. And that's why Grasp is very helpful in these specific lanes. It's because you get that extra damage from Grasp on those short trades. You get the sustain, the little bit of healing you get back from those trades. And you get scaling with the max health, which is perfect for volley. PTA has burst and is great in extended brawler trades versus certain champions like Gwen, Darius, Trundle, and Mordekaiser. PTA has a lot of burst, which is perfect for almost all ranged matchups, as if they make one misstep, you can punish them severely with the massive amount of burst that you get from PTA. Now, if you have Grasp as your primary tree, then I would recommend Shield Bash every single time into either Bone Plating or Second Wind. If you're playing a ranged matchup, then I would recommend Second Wind. If you're playing a more bursty matchup like Riven or Renekton, take Bone Plating. And lastly, I would recommend Overgrowth because it passively gives you max HP as you progress through the laning phase, which is perfect for Volley because his W scales off of HP, which is perfect for his damage and his healing. If you have Precision as your primary, then I would recommend Presence of Mind, Legend Haste, and Coup de Grace. As for your secondaries, you always have Resolve as your secondary or Precision as your secondary. If you have Resolve, you just do Second Wind if you're in a ranged matchup, and Bone Plating if you're in a burst matchup. On Precision on your secondary, I recommend Presence of Mind and Legend Haste. Building items on Volley is very tricky because he can build a lot of items and still do very well on a lot of different build paths. So what is the most effective, or what are some of the better ones? Well, it comes down to what are the best stats to build on Volley. The best stats for Volley are HP, Ability Haste, and Movement Speed. These 3 stats are the best stats you can put on Volibear in any game. AD Volley and AP Volley provide some of these stats in some of their items. Ultimately, I think AP Tank Volibear is one of the best builds you can build in the top lane right now. But you can build more damage, but you can only do it in certain games where the enemy comp will allow it. This game in the background, I went Rocket Belt and Cosmic Drive. And the main reason is because there was a Vayne, an Ashe, and a Sona. Most of these champions are very low mobility squishies, which is perfect if you're going Cosmic Drive Rocket Belt because you do a bunch of damage and you can keep up with them. But obviously not every comp will be like this. So that's why the most important thing to know and to learn, even just as a league player, is to build reactively to the enemy team. Don't just build the same items over and over again because you're comfortable with them and you don't know why you're building them. Build them for a reason. Alright, first up, let's talk about the AP Tank build and why is it good and what does it do. The first item you will build is Cosmic Drive. It is the holy grail of some of the best stats you can get on Volley all combined in a single item. For your second item, I would go Iceborne Gauntlet. Iceborne Gauntlet is one of the best items for Volley as a tank item. If they have a lot of AD, it's perfect. And if they have a lot of AP, then I would just switch that second item out for Spirit Visage and just do Iceborne on your third item. The trifecta of perfect items on Volley right now is Cosmic Drive, Iceborne Gauntlet, and Spirit Visage. These items are beautiful on Volley, especially when combined. And for your fourth and fifth items, I would recommend Randuin's. If they have a ADC that is building crit, it's very good against them. It really helps you stay alive way longer, especially in the late game. And then I would finish off with either Jack Show or Unending Despair, depending on what their damage is. Now that's the standard build. If we want more of a damage build, then obviously we would first start with Cosmic Drive again. If you're seeing a pattern, it's a very insane item on Volibear. And then you would go into either Rocket Belt or Rift Maker. Both of these items are also very good on Volibear. But again, I would still recommend you at least stack 2 to 3 tank items on Volley no matter the build you go. The reason is a lot of people think, oh, well, just if I build more damage, I will do a lot more damage. And kind of, that's true. But with Volibear specifically, he's a champion that the longer the fight goes on, the more damage he deals. So that's why you need to stack resistances and you need to build tank with him almost all the way. That's why I've been recommending Ability Haste and HP specifically, because the more bites he gets off in a fight means he has more healing. And if he has more healing, then he's survives longer to get even more bites off, which means more damage. It's like an unending loop. The longer you survive, the more damage you'll deal, the longer you survive. You get it. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, Navori Quick Blades. Now I understand, I love the item just as much as you guys, alright? It's a cool item, I love it, it's very nice. It feels amazing on Volibear. I just have a couple problems with it. For one, it doesn't give any HP. As I said before, HP is incredibly important to Volibear. Now, it is the ultimate ability haste item, in a sense, because if you're just going in and auto-attacking with your Q and W, which apply it, it's very good and you get your abilities up very fast. The problem with this playstyle is it's very one-dimensional, and it's very much just monkey go in and spam keyboard and just go crazy. And that type of playstyle isn't always viable. That's why I prefer the Cosmic build with HP and movement speed and ability haste, because you can do more of a bob and weave style where you can go in for a combo, disengage, and with the movement speed you still have the ability to re-engage if that fight looks good for you, or back off. It gives you more leeway to make more decisions, different type of plays, that Navori Quick Blades wouldn't allow you to do. Lastly, Rod of Ages is a good replacement for Cosmic Drive in certain games versus very specific champions like Scion and Ornn if they're going full tank. Because usually when they go full tank, they're very hard to kill and you use a lot of mana, and Rod of Ages is to compensate for this. Alright, moving on to boots, and what are the best boots for Volibear? With Volibear, you should only be building 3 types of boots. Plated steel caps, merc treads, boots of swiftness. I know some volley players will say that boots of lucidity should be in there, and it is very good, but with the new feat system, the merc treads and the plated steel caps and the boots of swiftness get insane upgrades when you fully enhance them, and it's too much to not prioritize those specific boots. I think Swifties are the best boots for Volibear, but in some games you do need to be going merc treads or plated steel caps depending on the enemy comp. Alright, next we will be talking about which abilities you will be leveling in specific matchups. For your starting ability, I would recommend your E. In almost all cases, it's generally good to have your E at level 1. But there are some games where you probably need to be going Q or your W level 1 depending on the enemy champions. These include certain champions like Tryndamere, Garen, Irelia, and even Riven. Taking your Q first versus these champions is very helpful because you lose the 1v1 at level 1 versus these champions. So generally it's good to take your Q as a nice disengage from them if they ever get on you too fast and you're out of position. Now starting your W is pretty good versus certain champions like Gwen and Fiora, especially Fiora, because if she engages with you and the level 1s and 2s to hit her vitals on you, then you can generally W her, especially if you have grasp, and it's almost always a winning trade. Alright, first, any matchups like Tryndamere, Darius, Mordekaiser, and Gwen, almost all of these type of games, you will be maxing W every single time. Basically, if it's in a matchup where you can be getting a lot of bites off, you're going to be maxing W. And I would recommend versus any ranged matchup that you would start your E just to farm in the bushes and always max your Q, no matter what. What matters in ranged matchups is that you get on them. And one of the only ways to get on them is to max your Q. The early game laning phase is one of the most vital parts for Volibear. He is a very good early game champion and a very good mid game champion. That's why you want to be making as many plays and to be as proactive as possible in that time frame. For the first wave, all you want to be doing is only last hitting the minions. You don't want to be pushing just yet. Then once the second wave comes, that's when you want to begin to ramp up your passive and start hard pushing. Now, as this is happening, you want to be focusing on the enemy's positioning, all the while keeping track of your own level up so that you're able to get a good level 2 engage off. Volibear's level 2 and his level 3 are incredibly strong, and that's when you want to be fighting. So if you can level up before they can, you have a massive advantage. And because of Volibear's passive, he already naturally does this very well. Now after this, all you want to do is just continue to finish out shoving the wave and make it crash, and have it bounce back to you. As this is happening, you want to make use of this time by rotating into the river, maybe checking on the blue buff to see where the enemy jungler is pathing, maybe rotate to help your jungler invade. Whatever it may be, you're available on the map, because while your laner is dealing with the massive wave, or small wave that you crashed under his turret, he has to deal with that while you're free to roam around the map and help your teammates. This is called getting prio. Now after you get back from having prio, you basically just do the same thing again. You just slowly ramp up on the minions, and as you do that, you pay attention to the enemy's positioning, and if they're in a close enough gap where you can close on them to get a good trade-off with your QEW combo. Now obviously, as you do this, you will be naturally pushing the wave, so you will be more susceptible to ganks. That's why I was recommending you walk to the enemy blue buff in between wave states so you could find out where the enemy jungler is pathing. Now, if the enemy jungler is pathing top, then I would just pop down a ward and try to play it safe. Maybe sit in some bushes, farm with your E. But if you still see that you have time, maybe he's on his red or on his blue and he's still clearing, or his raptors or something, then you have time and you can just shove out the wave and make it crash and just have it bounce back into you. Now, assuming the laning phase has gone pretty well so far, you're keeping track of the enemy jungler, you've got a couple combos off on the enemy laner and they're pretty low, this is the best time to look for kill pressure once they get below 40 to 30% HP. This is how I get 90% of the kills in my lane. Throw your E on top of them and then flash Q W auto for insane burst. Key for this to work every single time is to throw your E on top of them and wait about a second and then flash combo. If you wait a second, then you allow them to have no counterplay, as there's no way they can flash out of your combo. Trust me, nobody expects this burst damage from Volibear. Well, you might be thinking, isn't it very telegraphed? Wouldn't a good player be able to see it coming a mile away? Not always the case. It almost always works out for me, and I've almost never had anyone flash out of it. This is a clip of me doing it to TF Blade. And this is just proof that I think no matter what, even good players will not see this high amount of burst damage coming through from Volibear. Now remember, as you cast your E, they're going to be running in the opposite direction as you walk towards them. This is a good way to kind of make them move where you want them to move so you can get a good combo off. Now, obviously, not all lanes are the same. Sometimes you will be playing versus champions like Gnar, Teemo, and Vayne, and some early bruisers like Trundle and Darius, which you lose early. It's best to just concede the waves until you get about level 3 and level 4, and at that point you can start looking to contest the waves and any potential all-ins on the enemy laner. Above all, I think it's best to understand that not every lane will play the same, and you have to play adaptively to what your enemy laner is doing. One of the most important things to pay attention to as a top laner is the enemy's positioning. How do they posture towards you? This is a very good indicator on how the laning phase is going to be going, and how you will react to it. This is a Riven matchup, and Riven beats Volley very early. So right when he walks out of the bushes here and walks past my minions, I immediately know he's trying to play super aggressive here, so I have to throw the E and just back off. And the same thing applies here. I walk up for minions, but if I notice that he walks even more aggressively towards me, I back off and concede because Warwick beats Volibear early game. Now, once you get level 3, then you do about what I talked about before. You slowly ramp up on the minions, and you just look for a combo on the enemy. And then you combo them and back off, and then just continue farming. Some champions you can weave in a couple more autos within your combo, but it completely depends on the matchup. Specifically in this case with Warwick, you cannot do that. Something like Tryndamere, you can. Now, since you will be going a AP tank hybrid, the most important thing to remember in the laning phase is that whenever you go for those combo trades, always remember to have your passive up before you do it. Having your passive up or down is a big difference maker on whether you actually win that trade. That's why you basically want to shove every wave, because you're at your strongest when your passive is ramped, and you can shove the wave in to help your teammates. Overall, the goal of your early game laning phase is to slowly whittle down your enemy to set up a good flash combo kill. This can be achieved more than just comboing them in lane. You can also hide in the top bush or hide kind of in the river as they're farming under their own tower and throw E's at them to harass them as well. And as I said before, your second goal is to constantly push the wave to get prio, so that you can help your teammates in any situations they might need you in. Now, that doesn't mean you shove every single time. There are some situations where you do want to put up a freeze. Now, if you know you win the trade, or you know you will win the all-in, then it's good to bring them closer to your tower so you have more distance to run them down. They have to run all the way to their turret to get away from you. It gives you more opportunity for kill pressure. Another reason is if you notice your jungler is pathing topside. You also can freeze under your tower, and it forces them in a bad situation where they either need to leave or they're forced to maybe get ganked by your jungler. Another very important thing to remember in the early laning phase and mid game is the individual cooldowns of your enemy laner. This goes for all champions, but specific champions like Aatrox, Mbessa, and even Darius, they have very long cooldowns on some of their abilities. And this leaves them up for potential kill pressure every single time. For example, this Aatrox ends up going in for a trade here and uses his dash to back away and space me. The problem is right after he does that, he re-engages and walks back into me. Pay attention to things like this, because this is the immediate moment you know you can engage on him without him being able to get away from you. Alright, next we'll be going over how you'll play any of the ranged matchups that you might encounter. As I said before, like all matchups, pay attention to how they move towards you. And this is even more so for ranged matchups, because depending on how aggressive they play dictates how the lane will go. But in general, most of the time in ranged matchups, you will probably be getting pushed under your own tower. The most important thing versus ranged top laners is movement speed. That's why I've been recommending you max your Q every single time versus a ranged matchup. What you're trying to do in a ranged matchup is trying to farm as best you can and look for key moments to go in. Almost all the time, ranged top laners will overextend at some point when you're farming, and you can use that to your advantage. As I walk up here to farm, he lets his guard down and walks way too close, and this gives me the opportunity to go in and get a very huge trade-off. Remember, he's paying attention to his minions' HP, and when his minions get low and you walk up to last hit it, that's when he will be walking up to attack you. And sometimes when they come up to harass you, it's a prime time to go in. That's why minions are so important to pay attention to during the laning phase. This goes for ranged matchups and melee matchups. Right here, my minion is about to die, and I know she's going to walk up to last hit it. This is a great time to look for a QEW combo. Lastly, I want to talk about how to mid-max your trading patterns with Volibear during the laning phase. This is just some extra Volibear tech that I don't see a lot of Volibear players doing. Both his W and his Q are auto enhancements. What this means is that his Q and his W can go through virtually any stun or displacement in the game. This means you can W through things like Yone Q, and this always catches them off guard because they never expect it. It's a very good way to get amazing trades off that they're not ready for. Some other examples are Gragas E, Riven Q, and virtually any other stun in the game. As long as they are in range of your W and Q, it will go off. Now, during the mid game, you still want to be shoving waves, and you still want to be rotating to help your jungler with grubs, but especially after 14 minutes, that's when you want to maybe look around the map and look for potential roams. Now, every game is different. Some games will be more open, more people will be playing aggressive in the mid, and you can get easier roams off. Some games you can't, and it's not really possible. Your goal is just to pay attention so that if the opportunity does arise, you can capitalize on it. Now, if you have developed a good lead in the top lane, and there's not that many opportunities to roam, then your best bet is just to AFK split push and focus on getting towers and drawing pressure. An important thing to remember while you're splitting is splitting when it counts. For example, if you are very strong, you always want to be splitting on the opposite side of the objective that is spawning. So for example, if Dragon is spawning, then you want to be splitting top side. And if Baron is spawning, you want to be splitting bot side. You should only be splitting if you have TP available as well. If you don't have TP, then you should probably join that team fight wherever it is, whether it's Dragon, Baron, or Herald. The whole purpose of this type of gameplay is to force the enemy team to make a decision. Assuming you have a good lead and you're able to 1v1 your laner, they cannot hold you if you have your ulti. So they either A, send a lot of people after you to stop you from splitting, which would result in your team getting the objective on the other side of the map, or B, they contest the fight on the Baron pit or the Dragon pit, and you TP in to make it a 5v4. Or if it looks like your team is winning the fight, you can stay and kill your enemy laner and get a tower, or an inhibitor. Now, the decision whether to split or to stay for teamfights is completely different and depends on the game and how that game is going. Because you could be very fed and be able to 1v9 the world, but your teammates may not be able to do anything by themselves, and in that case you might need to join them for a teamfight. Overall, your primary goal with Volibear in the mid game is to help take objectives on the map and help your teammates do that, whether that's by splitting and drawing pressure, or by joining them in teamfights and being a big juggernaut frontline. Next, we're going to be talking about teamfights and how does Volibear fit into a teamfight scenario. What are your goals as Volibear in a teamfight? Well, again, it completely depends on how the game is going and who's the problem. Like, if one of their stronger members on their team is their ADC, then I would recommend you save your ulti for that ADC and you focus them every single fight. Your goal essentially is to neutralize the strongest member on their team. Volibear has incredible 1v1 potential, which means if you can always go for one person in a fight, you will almost guarantee win it if you have a good lead. Sometimes the fed ADC or the mid laner won't be available right away in the fight, so you may need to front to back the fight with the enemy top laner or jungler until an opening arises to get on the back line. Now, if your enemy top laner is fed or the enemy jungler is fed and they're a frontline bruiser, then in that case you want to front to back the fight by fighting the enemy jungler or the enemy top laner while your team is behind you dealing damage. You're essentially being a frontline tank at that point. And basically, as the game's going on, you just transition to who's more of a problem at that time. So if the mid laner's a problem later, you start focusing the mid laner. If the top laner starts being a problem, you probably should start focusing the top laner, etc, etc. Next, I want to talk about Volibear and his weaknesses. Volibear is incredibly strong when ahead, but he is also incredibly weak when behind. Now, this goes for being a league player as well, but you have to know your weaknesses as a Volibear player so you know how to improve it and how to play as best as you can when you're behind. Trust me, you will make a lot of mistakes and you will single-handedly throw your lane in multiple games, and it's completely normal. Top lane is a punishing role, and especially as Volibear, you are incredibly weak from behind, so if you make a mistake, it will punish you. Volibear's a lot stronger than Gwen early game, but here I messed up and I went for a flash play and accidentally took a tower shot. I then pulled a Henshin TP and proceeded to die again. This will make you wish for the sweet release of death, but trust me, the game is still winnable at this point. As you have made mistakes, so will your enemies. And as your enemies get leads, they get overconfident. And this overconfidence can lead to mistakes. Because of Gwen's cockiness and she didn't ward, I was able to get 2 ganks by J4, and it was able to single-handedly get me back into the game, and I was able to 1v9 this game and carry. Some games you will make that mistake of feeding a kill or 2, and you won't have a jungler to bail you out. What then? At that point, you need to try to get as much gold and XP as possible so that you can transition into the mid-game, into the late game, and your goal is to build defensively, so don't build Cosmic Drive, only build tank, and your goal is to be a big fat meat shield for your team. You're essentially supposed to just go in and die and absorb as much damage as possible. And you cannot be split pushing at all. You need to be there for your team so that you can absorb as much damage as possible, because that is where you will be most useful. Overall, you're just trying to be as useful as possible to your teammates. Is your ADC fed? Is your mid laner fed? You should probably try and peel for them in team fights instead of going in for the back line because you're weaker and you don't do as much damage. Pay attention to your win cons. It's not always you, especially if you're behind, you are no longer the win con. Your mid laner or your ADC is, sometimes your jungler. Just remember to always pay attention to things like this. Alright, moving on to the late game with Volibear. It will be very similar to Volibear's mid game, it will just have a couple differences. For one, Volibear is at his weakest in the late game. That's why I was talking about being proactive as possible in the early to mid game, because once you get to this stage, you're about as weak as you can get, comparatively to other champions. In that case, you may not win the 1v1 versus your enemy top laner, so you may have to join team fights more often. And sometimes, depending on the enemy ADC and the support, you may not be able to kill the enemy bot laners as easily, or the mid laner as easily, so you need to focus on peeling your win cons more often in the late game. It's almost like playing from behind, because you are weaker. Now, this doesn't mean you're not self-reliant. You can still take your fair share of 1v1s and come out on top. It just becomes less likely as the game goes on versus certain champions. Overall, your goal with Volibear in the late game is still help your team take objectives, but also be there for your team to supplement any gap they may have. Whether they need peel, they need a frontline tank, they need a hard split pusher that draws pressure. Whatever it is they need, you need to supplement it. Just a disclaimer, the things I talked about in this video are an idealistic point of view from a Volibear top lane's perspective on how to play the game as best as you can. Now, the lower elo you go, the less some of this stuff will matter, especially when it comes to stuff like splitting. Sometimes in lower elo, your team's not going to group for Baron while you're splitting. They won't pay attention to stuff like that. And in that case, I would recommend you play more of a selfish playstyle and play more for kills, towers, and inhibitors, and focus on just being a nuisance in the side lane. Alright, next I want to talk about the early game laning phase. I talked about the basics on what you should aim to do in lane in the early game, but a lot of that type of stuff comes down to experience with the enemy laners, which just comes with just playing the game. And some of that stuff I can't necessarily teach off in just one video. But I appreciate you guys watching. This is my first ever guide, so there's going to be some mistakes in this video and not enough information or maybe too much information. So let me know if you have any questions and I'll try to answer them as best as I can in the comments. And please put a like and please subscribe. This took me a while to make, and I will continue to make Volibear guides on certain champions to help more in-depth on some of those matchups. Anyways, thank you so much, and good luck playing Volibear.